So today's video is going to be on a topic that is very, very interesting to the both of us, and it's something that we've actually discussed before on this channel. We'll link some of the videos up here so you guys can see the ones that we have done already. But if you're new, today's topic is actually going to be about reincarnation. Now, this case is actually very, very famous. It's about the Pollock Twins. But before we get into today's video, we just want to send a quick reminder to please consider subscribing if you guys enjoy this type of content. We post 2 to 3 times a week, and we like to talk about paranormal stuff, true crime, unexplained mysteries. So if that's the type of content that you like, then please consider subscribing. Now, this story is probably one of the most unbelievable reincarnation stories that I've come across. Definitely the both of us do agree that this is a very, very interesting case. The little details and the little things that these girls were able to recall, I don't know, it's very creepy, and it's not information that a typical child of 2, 3, 4 years old would know of. So it definitely makes me believe even more in reincarnation. I don't know if that's possible because I already seem to believe it quite a bit. But this story really did make me a believer for sure. Reincarnation 101. Okay, so this story took place in May 1957 in Hexham, England. It's really sad, so a little disclaimer now, if you're sensitive to any type of accidents happening to children, it would be best if you stopped watching this video. So essentially what had happened is the two sisters, Joanna and Jacqueline Pollock, they were on their way to church with a friend of theirs, and they were walking there. Unfortunately, there was a driver driving by who was under the influence and actually ended up hitting the girls, and it ended up being fatal. So the two sisters, they actually died instantly, and then the friend died on their way to the hospital. What makes this even worse is that the driver actually was a woman who had intentionally hit the 3 girls. Yeah. So the reason why she did it was because she had actually just lost her kids in a custody battle. So she had a lot of anger inside of her, and I'm guessing because she was under the influence as well, maybe she wasn't in her right mind, or maybe she did it on purpose and just it was a way for her to release her anger. Yeah. She ended up taking it out on these 3 innocent girls and intentionally hit them with the car. So obviously parents of all the children were completely devastated. So the parents of Joanna and Jacqueline were obviously very, very sad. And a way to cope with this grief was for them to try to have another child. So they started trying, and John, the father of the girls, had this strange feeling that he reported. He was convinced that his 2 daughters that he had just lost would somehow come back to him. Now, the couple was Catholic. They were very, very devout to their religion, especially the wife who was called Florence. She was so devoted to her faith that she really, really refused to believe anything about reincarnation. But John was somehow persistent in this belief. He just had this feeling, this knowing that somehow his daughters would come back to them. Then on October 4th, 1958, Florence ended up giving birth to twin girls, and they were called Jillian and Jennifer. Now, this is where the story starts to pick up a little bit more. Now, if you don't know about reincarnation and you don't know how to tell if someone's been reincarnated, we'll give you guys a little bit of a intro. So there's a few signs that you guys can look out for, and a lot of the times it'll be younger children that are talking about their past lives. And the reason for this is that they're still new. They're still new to the earth, and they haven't developed as many filters or blockages as the rest of us have.
Or new experiences for that matter too.
And there are some adults that are still able to remember their past lives, and it's usually these people because they're very, very intuitive. Now, aside from the obvious and talking about past memories that don't make sense, there's also the idea that kids have knowledge of previous events that they wouldn't have known otherwise unless someone literally told them word for word what happened or what to say. Mm-hmm. A small child knowing details of past events is definitely a big sign of reincarnation, but there's also some physical ones as well. A lot of people have this belief that if you're born with a certain birthmark or a fairly large birthmark, it's often a sign of how or where you died in a past life. It's often considered to be a scar of trauma. Another sign of reincarnation are phobias. So a lot of phobias in your current life are often connected to some sort of traumatic experience that happened in a past life. So for example, let's say you have a unreasonable fear of water, it could be very likely that you probably drowned in a past life. So keeping that in mind, we'll go into the story a little bit more into detail now, and you'll be able to see how these dots connect, and it's very, very interesting to see how it all makes sense.
So the first sign that Florence and John noticed in the two newborn baby girls were the birthmarks. So Jennifer actually had two birthmarks, or two kind of signs that this was Jacqueline reincarnated. She had a birthmark on her hip that Jacqueline also had, and then she actually also had a scar on her forehead that Jacqueline also had from a previous accident from when she was alive. So that's a little weird, like to have had another child who passed and then you have this other one with the same thing. Like,
I'm sure a lot of people will say that it's just genetics and you're likely to have similar birthmarks, but the chances of them being the exact same spot or in the spot where there was a previous scar, very unlikely.
You know, as siblings, you do have some genetic similarities, but since you're not identical twins, it's not going to be the same. So with these twins, they both had birthmarks, but they were both in completely different areas of their body, which is rare for identical twins, given that they are genetically identical, right? So when the girls were 3 months old, the parents, and well, the whole family, I should say, they moved to Whitley Bay. But what's remarkable is that the girls actually didn't forget any of the memories from their past life when they lived in Hexham, England. So the girls actually still had a lot of memories that they were recalling and recounting to their parents about Hexham. So for instance, on a trip back to Hexham, the girls were about 4 years old at the time. They actually pointed out certain landmarks that they remembered from their previous life when they were Joanna and Jacqueline. So they were able to point out their former school.
Yeah.
That's weird. And they were also able to point out a former playground where they used to love playing. And they actually emphasized, hey, I used to go to school here. Hey, I used to love playing in this playground. So again, like how did these girls remember this? They moved to Whitley Bay when they were 3 months old. How could they possibly remember or have different memories from Hexham? Like, even if they did go to the playground, how can you remember that at 3 months old?
There's no way they would have known.
Exactly. John had actually stored a bunch of the toys that Joanna and Jacqueline played with just because, you know, it's devastating to have these reminders. So he put them away after they had passed. What's strange is that the girls, Jillian and Jennifer, they started to recall the toys that they liked playing with the most. And they actually started asking their parents about them. Like, where's my Barney? Where's my teddy bear? Like they started demanding wanting to play with them because they just loved them in the previous life. So that was also another check mark for John to say, these are my these are my baby girls. So another time when the girls were also a little bit older, around 4 or 5 years old, Jillian had pointed out the birthmark that I had mentioned earlier that Jennifer had on her forehead from a previous accident. So this was actually an accident that Jacqueline had when a bucket had fallen on her head accidentally and left a mark and a scar there. So how is it that Jillian was able to point this out on Jennifer, who was previously Jacqueline from a past life?
Yeah.
That's so strange to me. Like, I'm just blown away right now. I already read the story, but just hearing about it again or saying it again, it's astounding.
And it's funny because it gets even weirder. It doesn't stop there.
Yeah.
So aside from pointing out those birthmarks and memories, the girls had intense nightmares of the day they died. So they would often wake up screaming in the middle of the night, afraid that they were going to get hit by the car. And this actually crossed over into their day-to-day life, where they actually developed a phobia of cars, especially if they started getting way too close for their comfort. So whenever a car would get too close to them, they would end up screaming and literally running away, convinced that the car was coming to get them. The girls start growing up, they're getting a little bit older, and they're starting to develop their personal preferences, and this includes taste in food, which also coincidentally ended up being the exact same that their previous sisters in their past life had also had. So things are starting to add up, and it's very quickly becoming something that their parents can no longer ignore. And this is something that the girl's mother, Florence, had a really hard time with, because she was Catholic, she was super religious. She almost refused to believe that this would be possible, but that all changed one day when she actually overheard the girls playing. So one day the girls were hanging out, they were playing together, and that's when their mother, Florence, had actually overheard them, and she was able to piece together what they were saying, that the girls were reenacting the day they had died. So they were pretending that they had gotten hit by a car, and one of the girls was holding the other girl's head in her hands, screaming, oh my God, the car hit you," and pointing out to her eyes and to her head, saying that this was where all the blood was coming out from. And so seeing this, horrified, obviously the mother was basically forced to believe that these new twin baby girls were her previous daughters.
As interesting as all of these experiences and recalls from the girls were, sadly enough, when they turned about 5 years old, or 5 or 6, they actually ended up forgetting all of the memories, and they stopped recounting all of the experience that they had in their past life. So nevertheless, a lot of people, including us, think that this is a really good case or showing evidence of true reincarnation. But of course, there's still a lot of skeptics. And the reason why a lot of people are skeptical about this case too is because John and Florence actually also had other kids. They had 4 sons that were older than the twins. So some people might suspect that the older brothers kind of might have been telling them stories or feeding them information about the other 2 sisters who had passed. So, I mean, they're not wrong. It is possible.
It's definitely possible, but the part that kind of throws me off a little bit is that there was so much information.
Yeah, the details about it.
And it's hard for me to imagine a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, 4-year-old even, to be able to memorize this many details and repeat them in a way that was basically on point the entire time.
Exactly. Like, how is it that when they were playing by themselves, they were able to recount, this is where you got hit and you had blood coming out of your eyes? Like, that's a big detail. Only people who were there would really know about it, right? Unless the brothers might have found their bodies or something, which I hope they didn't, because that's pretty traumatizing.
No. Anyway, so that is the story of the Pollock twins. What do you guys think about this reincarnation story? Do you guys think this is a really strong case for the theory, or do you guys think that this is probably just a bunch of coincidences? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We would love to hear your opinions. And if you guys have any other stories on reincarnation that you think we should cover or that we should read about, please leave them also in the comments below.
Comment, like, subscribe. See you later, heebie-jeepsters.